And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Friday, April 25th, 2025. And this outlook is for the weekend, but first we check the state of the sea ice. And as you can see across the central, northern, and eastern Bering, the ice is beginning to erode on many sides. We have openings there, downwind from St. Lawrence Island. We find also areas breaking up along the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim coastline, as well as the south shore of the Seward Peninsula into eastern Norton Sound. And again, this will only continue as we have the warming that occurs now that we're transitioning out of April and into May. Even though cooler than normal temperatures are going to persist along the north and west side of the state, it will still be enough to eventually get the ice to melt out. And we are going to have an area of low pressure this weekend. Late this Friday night, early Saturday morning, the low is just north of Unalaska, and with a trough that trails northward, there's going to be a patch of light snow pass through the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, Bering Strait, and around St. Lawrence Island. There is a winter weather advisory for St. Lawrence Island in the pre-dawn hours of Saturday morning through 10 a.m. Sunday morning for an inch or two of snow. Winds could gust 30, 40 miles an hour, so visibilities could at times be reduced to a half mile there in the vicinity of St. Lawrence Island on Saturday into early Sunday. Meanwhile, the Panhandle is going to get a break from the steadier rain and rain showers. There still could be an isolated pop-up shower with the daytime heating, but the next area of low pressure will be coming up out of the North Pacific and will push into the Gulf Coast and Panhandle later Sunday and for Monday. But in the meantime, the low just sits out here in the southeast part of the Bering. It'll actually pivot back to between St. Paul and Nunavik Island, with that trough persisting along the west coast and a couple of weaker troughs rotating within the circulation. You also just have this general trough that sits over the Alaska Range. And into Sunday, here comes that next low from out of the North Pacific into the Gulf. This will bring some steadier rain back into the northeastern Gulf Coast around Yakutat and in through the Panhandle, especially for Sunday night and into the day on Monday. Meanwhile, the low just sits and spins out here between St. Paul and Nunavik Island with scattered snow showers. It's not going to be a widespread rain into the southwest interior, more scattered, either rain showers or snow and rain showers mixed. And looking at Saturday for the inner channels, kind of variable winds, 5 to 10 knots, waves only a foot or two, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, even here at Dixon Entrance outside of Ketchikan and Metlakatla. Winds will be south-southeasterly, south of Sitka, 15 to 20 knots, and then those winds more easterly offshore there, Sitka up through Icy Strait and outside of Yakutat Bay with waves maybe 5 feet. On Sunday, winds with that approaching front will be southeast to south across the inner channels, 10 to 15 knots with waves 2, maybe 3 feet down here outside of Metlakatla. And then Sitka and off of Craig, southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. Easterly winds picking up locally to 30 knots there off of Cape Suckling with waves 6, maybe as high as 9 feet there off of Cape Suckling. For Prince William Sound Saturday, winds will be easterly 20 knots. Look for easterly winds of 25 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. Northeast winds 20 knots, upper Middle Cook Inlet, but east to southeast winds of 30 knots into Kamishak Bay and at Kennedy Entrance with waves of 7 to 8 feet for Saturday. Sunday, look for easterly winds, Prince William Sound, 15 knots, 3-foot waves. Winds could be 25 to 30 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance back toward Kayak Island. And then northeast to north winds, upper Middle Cook Inlet at 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot waves, and easterly winds of 20 knots there in lower Cook Inlet with 4 to 5-foot waves. Saturday, you can see that low circulation that's going to be located in the southeast corner here of the Bering. South-southeast winds 15 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island. Southeast winds 20 knots either side Bristol Bay, east of Chicknick, and then turning more southwesterly as you get down there. Either side Cold Bay and False Pass, southwest winds of 20 knots on Saturday. For Sunday, still south winds 15 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, and then generally more southwesterly winds along the Alaska Peninsula, and they'll be stronger as you trail out down toward Cold Bay and False Pass. Either side, southwest winds to 25 knots. Along the Aleutian chain, Saturday, the eastern Aleutians, Nikolsky and Unalaska, west winds to 20 knots. Those winds become northwesterly, 20 knots. Atka, Adak, back to Kiska before falling off to 15 knots there towards Shemya. And then on Sunday, with the low sitting further north there between St. Paul and Nunavik Island, we have southwest to west winds right around 20 knots over the eastern Aleutians. But as we get west of Adak, those winds turn back more to the northeast and east and pick up to 25 to 30 knots, especially Kiska westward through Shemya. Offshore flow will be the rule Saturday across the southwest. We're looking at east winds 20 knots within Bristol Bay, northeast winds 20 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, and then generally easterly winds 10 to 15 knots, especially there out of Norton Sound. Variable winds in the vicinity of St. Matthew, with the Pribilofs seeing northerly winds at 15 knots. For Sunday, that area low pressure, the circulation there between St. Paul and Nunavik Island, southeast of St. Matthew, so you get that circulation and what you expect with a low. South winds 15 knots into Bristol Bay, southeast winds there in Kuskokwim Bay to 15 knots. North winds 20 knots there at St. Matthew, but westerly across the Pribilofs at 25 knots. Still easterly flow along the lower Yukon coastline up into Norton Sound right around 15 knots. And then on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, Saturday, northeast winds to 30 knots. Again, that winter weather advisory continues through the day Saturday into early Sunday for some light snow and blowing snow. The lower Chukchi Sea east winds out of Kotzebue Sound 15 to 20 knots as we come up along Cape Lisburne to Wainwright. Northeast to east winds 25 knots, and those 25-knot easterly winds continue from Wainwright through Utqiagvik all the way to Kaktovik, where in Kaktovik they could locally be as high as 30 knots. This area just recently issued a winter weather advisory for blowing, drifting snow for areas of the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Saturday and into early Sunday morning. On Sunday, we expect easterly winds right around 25 knots from Kaktovik through Wainwright. They'll turn northeasterly coming around Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, and northeast to east winds 15 knots out of Kotzebue Sound. And finally, coming down along the Bering Strait, Wales, Port Clarence, northeast winds 10 knots, but on the north side of St. Lawrence Island for Sunday, we could still see some northeasterly winds to around 20 knots.